he just does some of these things that are just so despicable, in the name of motivation, or his warped brand of machismo. Like there's countless scenes, but there's like one infamous one where he talks about which son he likes most, and he tells them to their faces, like, you're my favorite, and then it goes to you, and then you, and then you, and but maybe you could end up being my favorite, but for right now, you're most definitely not. He's my favorite. And it is just so despicable. Now, my friends, we're going to go ahead and we're going to move on to the next part of my show today, and that is my review for The Iron Claw, a very recent release, a movie that's kind of, taken a lot of people by storm because everyone's saying this is like one of the best movies of the year, and that it most definitely should not be overlooked, because apparently that might be the case. This might be getting overlooked, and maybe it's not being nominated for a lot of awards, especially for the director and a number of the actors, the performers in the film. But in any case, Chad, give you a brief background, bit of a synopsis. This is centering on the Von Erich brothers and their family, who made history in the competitive world of wrestling in the 1980s. Their domineering father exploits them, and constant struggles and tragedies plague them throughout their early lives. First of all, when it comes to wrestling, I have to admit, I have very little experience with it. I used to watch a bit of it with my dad in like the late 1990s, like on TV. And I remember certain wrestlers like Sting, the guy with like the white makeup and stuff, and like, The Undertaker. And I remember going to like a WWE match. I think that's what they're called now. I don't know. They might have been still called like the WWF for all I know. But in any case, we went to a wrestling match that might have been the WWE, WWF, one of those in like the early 2000s with my dad as well. I mostly know wrestlers who, left the sport and transitioned to filmmaking and acting, to great success in the case of people like, Dave Bautista, who I think has been one of the most surprising, people to come from the wrestling world, just because of all the different types of characters that he's been playing in his career so far, whether it be something like in Guardians of the Galaxy or Dune or Knock at the Cabin or Blade Runner. It's been really great to see his evolution as an actor. And even though I wasn't the biggest fan of the movie, the Knives Out, the Glass Onion film, I thought he was really good there. And also more recently, people like, John Cena, who's like really kind of, showing his chops with characters like Peacemaker and the Suicide Squad and the Peacemaker, TV series. I knew others before, like, Andre the Giant and Hulk Hogan, too. But again, it was mostly through their film roles. Since I knew so little about wrestling itself, I knew absolutely nothing about the Von Erich brothers or the family that they came from. I might have heard the Von Erich name or the curse in the pop culture zeitgeist, which this movie certainly explores, but not enough to speak on it with like any sort of depth. Well, I have seen the movie, and I've definitely learned a lot more about this famous, even tragically infamous family, and all I can say is, wow, what a picture. First of all, despite what the trailers might be selling, I would not really describe this as your rise and fall prototypical sports drama, something like, Rocky or The Natural or all those other types of, movies. Not that wrestling doesn't play like a huge role in this movie. It absolutely does. But it's more of a look into the loving, but at the same time, very dysfunctional and consistently just tragic circumstances surrounding this family. This is from filmmaker Sean Durkin, whose work I've never seen before this film, obviously. What he has done, he has crafted a very personal story about a loving brotherhood and how immensely painful it can be when losing someone with all your heart, despite a messed up upbringing. The brothers are Kevin, Carrie, David, and Mike. and they're all played by Zac Efron, Jeremy Allen White, Harris Dickinson, and Stanley Simmons, respectively. All of them across the board are great and have wonderful chemistry with each other. They actually feel like brothers, which in turn makes them so much of the emotional gut punches that this movie throws at you, like, just hurt even more. I mean, it's not for the faint of heart. We're dealing with death by disease, characters losing limbs, and a lot of times, suicide. It never once feels, though, because people are like, oh, that's a lot. That's a lot of tragedy in this movie. But it never once feels exploitive. And the way in which these scenes that involve these subjects, I feel like, are written and acted very well and are come across very earnestly and very honestly. I think so often, in a lot of these types of movies or any other genre, they could just have these scenes where the movie is just about that tragic moment that happens. But I feel like this movie is much more than that. Going back to the performances, as I said, everyone is great in this movie. But Zac Efron, I think, gives the best performance of his career here. He's been popping up, in a lot of, dramas and genre films for like well over a decade, trying to cross over into more just like serious theatrical fare, and he's done it. And I think he's done it with the character of Kevin Von Erich, emotionally and physically. I mean, he is absolutely jacked in this movie. I mean, he has perfectly created the physique of one of those just 1980s wrestler, to the point where I'm just like, are you okay? Like, was this healthy? I mean, I imagine all these actors, they have the, the trainers and nutritionists and they're able to keep them on track and make sure they're stabilized. But it's like, looking at him, it's like, wow. Because I think a lot of people were talking about, I think it was like a year ago, because he was prepping for this role for like over a year, if not more. And people are saying, like, why does his like face look a certain way? Everyone said that, like, he got this like plastic surgery, and it's like, nope, it's just because he had to radically change his diet and his workout regimen, and because he's so swole in this movie. But, other than his physical transformation, which is, of course, very, very impressive, he gets some of the most emotional scenes within this film, and is often dealing with the near constant tragic deaths of his family members, and again, specifically his brothers. He has a really sensitive side, not only like with his siblings, with his his male co-stars, but also with his female co-star, Lily James, who plays Pam Atkinson, who's at first his girlfriend and later wife in the film. He's able to open up to her in a way that he wouldn't be normally able to. And, we also hear about the Von Erich curse, the supposed curse that followed the family for years, that has caused them, so much misfortune. It's kind of like we're Pam in this case, and he's telling Pam, us the audience, like what the curse is, what it's done to the family, and how it's affected certain members, and how they're kind of in fear of it. Now, I think a big source of that actual misfortune and tragedy is caused by the father of the Von Erich brothers, Fritz Von Erich, played by Holt McCallany. Now, you've seen him before. You might not recognize the name, but you've seen him before. He's a character actor, and he had a major role. He was one of the two leads in the highly underrated serial killer series Mindhunter, which sadly, chat, was canceled way before its time. Would have loved the third season at least to wrap some of this stuff up. He plays an emotionally and psychologically abusive person in this film. So much so that he sometimes doesn't even realize it, because he's just so used to just being like a bad person that he's thinking like, no, I'm actually, being loving towards you, but doesn't really like understand that he's saying something just so incredibly cunning, and that will most definitely create anxiety in his sons and his other family members, that will then manifest in the worst ways possible. Because he's so blinded. So obviously blinded by his own ambitions, but he also just does these things that, to me, because people are like, oh, he doesn't really know what he's doing. I feel like part of it, he does know what he's doing. He just does some of these things that are just so despicable. in the name of motivation, or his warped brand of machismo. Like there's countless scenes, but there's like one infamous one where he talks about which son he likes most, and he tells them to their faces like, "You're my favorite," and then it goes to you, and then you, and then you, and but maybe you could end up being my favorite, but for right now, you're most definitely not. He's my favorite. And it is just so despicable. It is just so abusive. And that's where the curse comes from. It's from these very abusive parents. The mom, the mom doesn't do anything. She's just like, whatever. Like, she's not a source of warmth at all. Anytime like the son's trying to get the mom, she's like, I'm not getting involved. Like, she's just this absentee parent. It's like, she's like, I cook, I make breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I provide protein snacks for you. I saw that. I'm not helping. The father will do it. Like, she doesn't care about because you have to live with the father for so many years. That's the reason, she is the way she is. But it's just, this was the cause of it. You had an absentee parent, and you had an incredibly, psychologically and emotionally manipulative father who just had such an impact on his sons and tried to live out his ambitions through his sons that he ended up causing them so much misfortune. So he created so much drama, which when it was unnecessary. And again, Holt McCallany, he does a great job. He's a character that you hate him. You hate him because it starts subtly too. At first, it's like, oh, that's kind of a fucked up thing to say. But then they'll have like these loving scenes, and you get a sense that like they have like a good rapport. But then he'll do something next. He's like, oh yeah, this guy's just broken inside. He's so broken he doesn't realize that he's broken. But it's a great performance. Like, all the acting in this movie is great. But he just plays his character. You realize like, oh yeah, you're him and the wife. You're the source of all of this. Although it's probably generational, passed from his father to him, and then he's trying to do it to his sons. But that'll definitely rile you up. We go through so much of their lives, at a relatively like steady pace, in my opinion. But I will say, if I have any criticism of this movie, which I really don't outside this, the movie does seem to rush a little bit towards the last third. Again, not that it's bad. I like the last third. The last third is actually quite good, and it's sad, but it's also a little hopeful. I wouldn't have actually minded if we had an extra 25 minutes for that final act, just to kind of breathe a little bit. It's great as is, but unlike bullshit like Ridley Scott's Napoleon or Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon, this is a film that I wouldn't mind a director's cut of. I think it would actually enhance an already great movie. And again, easily one of the best movies of the year. I think that's what a director's cut should always do. It shouldn't just exist because the original product was just so terrible and so bad that the only way to fix it is to put all these extra scenes in. No, it's meant to enhance probably what is already an amazing movie, already a great movie. And it was so good, in fact, that I was just like, you know what? And it has like I think it's like just 2 hours, or maybe slightly just over 2 hours. It's like at that 2 hour mark. But I'm like, you know what? They add another 20, 25 minutes, another half hour to this, I would have been okay, because I was so invested in this story, as sad it is, as tragic as it is, and it is sad. I mean, some of the things you don't really see happen. You don't realize like, oh, they're building to something. Sometimes they're just so surprising, and it's just like, man, that's just randomly happens. But that's life. I think that's what this movie does so well. It is a nice slice of life in focusing like on this family that wasn't involved in wrestling, but it's just more how so many of them suffered due to the abuse of certain people, but how some of them, or like one of them, managed to circumvent that with also experiencing tragedy on their own and losing so much, but comes out a little hope. Like at least at the very end of the movie, like there is a little bit. So not to say like, oh god, this is just tragedy after tragedy after tragedy. It does have a bit of hope in the end, which I did like, which is like, okay, well, at least thank God for that. But yeah, no, if you just want to see a great film filled with amazing performances, with a fantastic, cast, Chad, if you want to see Zac Efron like really, truly act his ass off, physically, but also emotionally. You know, I mean, this, like I said, this is the best performance of his career. I think you're going to really enjoy the Iron Claw. There's a lot of, and for someone like, again, who knew nothing really about this story outside of, like, maybe I heard the name Von Erich, but I never knew anything about the family at all, or the curse and stuff like that. So this was a great way, I think, to be exposed to this story. Now, I do know that apparently they do have left some stuff out, which is always the case with biopics or, historical films. Like, you always got to walk that tightrope, It's like, at the same time, you want to tell the most honest, earnest story possible, but also, like, we want to entertain the audience. And, I'm sure there's a lot more details that probably could, maybe in that, like I said, that, like, about that 20, 25, 30 minutes that I wouldn't have actually minded they added a little bit more to the story. I think that would have been fine. I think that would have been cool. But in any case, even without that, I still think it's a very good movie. I think it's a great film. I think it, features outstanding main performances and supporting performances, and it's definitely one of my favorites of the year. It's definitely on my top 10 list, at least right now, for 2023. But what about you guys? Do you have any familiarity with the Von Erichs? Do you know nothing about them like I did? For those of you who have seen it, did you like the movie? Were you mixed on it? Did you not like the movie? And for those of you who haven't seen it, are you interested in seeing this film? Please let me know.